We call to order the Colerain Township Zoning Commission meeting for Tuesday, May the 18th, 2021. Would everybody please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Kohler, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Mr. Faring? Here. Ms. McMullen?
Here.
Mrs. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Gehring? Mr. Grody?
Here. Okay, in Mr. Gehring's absence, we have Mr. Westfall is seated this evening.
Here.
Here.
Okay.
Here we go. Okay, before we get started, we ask everybody present to please silence their personal devices, telephones, and televisions that you might have in your pockets or whatever. And commissioners and staff, if you'll please make sure that your microphones are on. A word of welcome to all who are present here in the meeting room this evening and to those who are tuning in this evening at home. We welcome all of you here. And a special word of welcome to Mr. Kohler, who's back with us, filling the position, and we are delighted to have you back.
Thank you.
So hope you enjoy the time that you're with us. How many times retirement is that, Marty?
Just once.
Once, okay. So, all right, moving on. Under advice from legal counsel, we have a number of minutes that we need to approve, and we do have to take those individually. So if everybody would please look at the minutes for December 15th, 2020. And if someone, or first of all, are there any necessary changes, corrections, additions, or deletions?
Mr. Kohler?
Yes.
I just have the one addition of my name for the second for the Redwood vote on page 2.
So noted.
Okay, anything else? Can we have a motion to approve, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the December meeting.
Is there a
minutes.
second?
I'll second.
Okay. Mr. Kohler, can we please have a roll call?
Yes. Mr. Westfall?
Aye.
Mrs. Smith?
I was absent.
Ms. McMullen?
Yes.
Mr. Faring?
Yes.
Mr. Grody?
Yes. If you would look at the meeting minutes for March the 2nd, 2021. And again, the same order if there are any changes, corrections, etc. Hearing none, could we please have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second that.
Okay. Mr. Kohler, could we have the roll call?
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Faring?
Yes.
Ms. McMullen?
Yes.
Mr. Westfall? Abstain. Mr. Grody?
Yes. And finally, the minutes for March the 16th, 2021. Are there any changes, corrections, etc.? Hearing none, can we have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Mr. Kohler, could we please have a roll call?
Mr. Faring?
Yes.
Ms. McMullen?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Westfall? Abstain. Mr. Grody?
Yes. Moving on, I take it, Mr. Kohler, we have no public address this evening?
Correct.
Okay. Moving on again, final development plan. The first case for us to review is ZA 2021-01, Abbeytown Final Development Plan. Mr. Kohler, does staff have a presentation?
Yes, we do. This is a request for approval of a final development plan for the construction of 68 single-family homes in the Planned Development Residential, or PDR, district. The applicant is Brad Austin, representing MI Homes of Cincinnati, LLC. This came to you as a preliminary development plan a couple months ago. The project's at the very northeast corner, or near the northeast corner of the township and the Pleasant Run area. The property is currently vacant, mostly agricultural in nature. It was previously zoned R2. It has since been rezoned. Now it is PDR by Township trustee action. The surrounding zones are all residential. The approval criteria, as we did, there's approval criteria for the preliminary plan, then there's separate approval criteria for the final. And I'll run through this just very quickly. Number one, the appropriate arrangement with the applicant has been made to ensure the accomplishment of public improvements, reservation of common open space as indicated on the preliminary development plan and final development plan. If deemed necessary by the Township Board of Trustees during the preliminary development plan approval process, this assurance may require the Board of Township Trustees require a bond to ensure the successful and proper completion of such improvements. Just to give you a little insight, this development process, after the approval of this final development plan, the applicant will need to go to the Hamilton County Regional Planning Commission and seek approval for a actual subdivision plat. The plat is the legal document that will create the open space in the individual lots. It will incorporate all of the covenants, and it will set up the homeowners association. Those are all the legal documents, but that does not happen until after this particular step. But we kind of walk through every step of this with the Hamilton County Planning Commission to make sure all of your conditions are sort of wrapped in with that final subdivision plat. So there's still a few stages that they have to go to after tonight, not necessarily involving us directly. The proposed detailed final development plan for an individual section of the overall PD is consistent with the contents, building locations as applicable, land uses, density, intensities, yard requirements, and area and frontage requirements with the approved preliminary development plan, the Colerain Township Land Use Plan, and the Township Comprehensive Plan. This speaks to a phased development. I asked the applicant if this was going to be phased, and they indicated that they intend to build out the entire subdivision as a single unit, which kind of saves a lot of the complications of which phase do you get the open space, which phase do you get certain improvements, because now it's all one unified stage. And number 3, and I skipped. Each individual phase of the development can exist as an independent unit. I won't go through that again because this is not a phased development. Number 4, the part of the planned development not used for structures, parking, loading area, streets shall be landscaped, otherwise improved, or if approved by zoning commission, left in its natural state. And we'll follow that as we go through the plans. Number 5, that any exception from the design standards provided in the preliminary PD district is warranted by design and amenities incorporated in the detailed final development plan. And we'll see plans for those things. Number 6, the internal streets and thoroughfares proposed are suitable and adequate to accommodate the anticipated traffic within and through the development. Number 7, the detailed final development plan is consistent with the intent and purposes of Article 1 of this resolution. Article 1 is basically the justification for why we have zoning in Colerain Township. Number 8, the final development plan has been transmitted to all other agencies and departments charged with responsibility for review. And the applicant has submitted evidence that they have submitted to all the ones that they need to have reviewed prior to our review of this plan. Next, the final development plan. As I mentioned before, we had a public hearing back in March. Grab the right report. On March 2nd, that was a recommendation to our Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees held a separate public hearing and approved the preliminary development plan as recommended by Zoning Commission. And Zoning Commission had a whole list of conditions to that approval. So that's all been part of the approval for that zone change to this property. So this comes back to you as a final development plan. This is not a public hearing tonight. We don't send notices out to neighboring property owners. That is all done at the preliminary stage. Just to run through, and you have this in your packet, and there is a piece of correspondence in your packet from the developer that responds to all of these conditions. I think I'll spare going through those unless you want to go through those in any kind of detail. If you have questions about those, we can go through that as we go on. But they have in some form addressed all of these conditions. The components of the final development plan, that's fairly important that we realize it's this bundle of plans that become sort of our zoning covenant for this property. And that consists of a document called Final Development Plan. That's by Abercrombie and Associates. There's a letter from Brad Austin to myself that outlines the conditions for approval and how they've addressed those conditions. There's a document called Abbeytown Site Rendering by MSP, engineering consulting firm. There was a U.S. Postal Service National Delivery Planning Standards document that was submitted dealing with the mailboxes, building plans and elevations. There were, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 individual house plans and elevations. And there is a 4-page drawing packet called Abbeytown Street Tree Plan by MSP. So all of those documents combined becomes the final development plan. This is that document called Final Development Plan. It shows the contours, the lot layouts, open space, the stormwater detention pond, etc. This is a little bit blown up version. It is virtually identical to what you saw as the preliminary development plan. If you recall, there was a requirement or discussion about sidewalks along Kemper Road. The township trustees agreed to waive the requirement for sidewalks on Kemper Road. In exchange for that, they were required to provide a sidewalk connection adjacent to Lot 17. Get my laser pointer. This is Lot 17, and there is a open space strip that was dedicated and now shows up in the plan to accommodate that sidewalk. What that did is it basically shifted all of the lot lines of that little series of lots over to the west slightly. So that's a bit of a change from the preliminary development plan in terms of the lot configuration. Didn't change the number of lots, density, any of those types of things. It was just a swap of space. This plan, they have identified an area they call no clearing, and that gets to some of our criteria. It says if zoning commission chooses, the developer can have areas that are just left in its natural state. And that is the intent for the area that's highlighted in green on here. is that they basically not touch it. It's open space. If residents want to hike through it and do whatever, it is part of the common open space. Next. Again, that points out where the public sidewalk is. Something that is rather new that we have not dealt with and actually have no design criteria for are cluster mailboxes. And I understand that the post office is now going to require this for all single family. We've had them in condo developments and places where we have private streets, but not necessarily where we have public streets. I did express a concern to the developer on the location that is closest to Kemper Road. It's kind of in the curve of the road. Ideally, these boxes would be on sort of your incoming route into the subdivision rather than the outgoing route. Unfortunately, the incoming route, there's really no open space, and you don't particularly want to put a cluster mailbox in somebody's front yard. So they put them in the open space. I've talked to them about putting it in the space I'm kind of, my highlighter, in this particular area of open space. There's better sight distance. People are going to have to park their car, walk across the sidewalk, and these are behind the sidewalk out of the right-of-way. So it just seems like it would not block traffic as much as it would be in that bend of the road, kind of near the entrance. Particularly if people are coming in, you want to pick your mail up as you go into the subdivision. We'd be parking on a curve, walking across the street, getting your mail, et cetera. So, and the applicant has agreed to look at that as the alternate for that particular mailbox. I take it, this top half of the subdivision, there's an open space that cuts through, almost divides the units in half being on that north side, half being on the south side. Okay, so this is the final development plan. It shows that they intend to do a streetscape program, or a street tree planting program throughout the subdivision. This is kind of a nice thing in terms of environmental. It shades the pavement. It helps reduce speed of traffic, believe it or not. But it's a nice amenity to have for a neighborhood. I haven't copied all the elevation drawings, but the ones that are provided all have that element of brick, which was one of the requirements. They all meet, there was a minimum square footage requirement, and they were all required to have basements. That all of those stipulations have been met with these plans. Another view showing that street tree planting program. It also shows the location for a playground in the open space. This is somewhat near the stormwater retention pond. They provided, this was attached to the letter, a concept of what that playground would look like. There was perimeter buffering. This was actually included in the preliminary development plan. It's not necessarily information that's required in the preliminary, but they provided it just to show that they were trying to screen this development from adjacent properties. Some more detail on the fencing, the entry monument feature, more on the entry monument feature. Staff's recommendation, the finding is that the final development plan does conform with the approval criteria that I went through, and then it's approval with conditions, and these are our conditions. And it's basically all the conditions that were in the preliminary development plan that would carry through. Oh, and you know what? I missed my final slide. The final conditions were the street lighting district be set up, and that was part of the preliminary plan. That the applicant work with staff to determine the optimum location for the cluster mailboxes, which they have. That a public sidewalk adjacent to Lot 17 be constructed at the time the house on Lot 17 is constructed. And that's more just logistics. You don't want to be tearing up the backyard afterwards, and it just seems like the time to get that sidewalk in. And that the playground be installed prior to half of the 68 homes be constructed in the development. And that's just so that the people who buy the first half of the homes will have some playground available to them. So that is our recommendation. Again, this is not a public hearing, but the applicant is present and may want to make a statement regarding this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kohler. Commissioners, any questions or comments for Mr. Kohler before we move on to the applicant? One question, Mr. Kohler, on the sidewalk. Are you saying that the trustees are not going to have the township install the rest of that sidewalk up to Kemper Road as was shown in the preliminary development plan?
Up to Pippin?
Up to Pippin, that's what I mean.
What the developer is going to do is make a payment in lieu of construction of that sidewalk. That goes into a township fund that can fund sidewalks elsewhere. I don't believe that they have specifically designated those funds for that connection. I do know that this is a fairly high priority, particularly, it really wasn't mentioned much in the preliminary stage, but Northwest Schools is not busing children within a mile radius of their schools. This development falls within a mile radius of the Pleasant Run schools. So it would be helpful to have a safe route for the residents of this to be able to get to the schools. So therefore, it's a high priority to get public sidewalks to connect.
So that's yet to be determined by the township?
I don't believe that they have formally set those funds aside for that
Okay.
project. I believe that there is an intent there to do so.
Okay. Commissioners, again, any other questions or comments for Mr. Kohler? Okay, if we could have the applicant come forward, please, and as you do, make your presentation, if you'll state your name, your address, and please spell your last name for the record of the minutes today.
Sure. Good evening, Commissioners.
And you're welcome to
Excuse me.
remove your mask if you like to, sir.
My name is Scott Huber, Huber. I'm the site civil engineer with Abercrombie and Associates, 8111 Cheviot Road, Suite 200, 45247. We're asking for approval tonight of the final development plan. The developer is here with me. Mr. Tom Lofquist is here, and he's available for any questions. I don't have a presentation for you. I think the staff's presentation was very thorough and it was correct. We are in agreement with the conditions as they were presented, and we have no additional comments or revisions. So Mr. Lofquist and myself are available for any additional questions, but we're asking for approval. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Lofquist, did you want to make any comments? Okay, again, if you'd state your name, spell your last name and your address, please.
Might be the hardest part tonight. Tom Lofquist, it's Lofquist. With MI Homes, it's 9349 Waterstone Boulevard. That's Cincinnati, 45249.
Thank you.
Brad Austin would normally be here. He's the face that you've seen up here on behalf of MI Homes, but he couldn't be here tonight, so I'm pitch hitting. I just wanted to pass along his thanks for the cooperation and working through this, and just be here for any questions that you might have. I believe everything else that's been addressed tonight has been confirmed in letter form. I think we have everything in good shape, but of course, if there's any remaining questions, we're happy to answer them.
Okay,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Commissioners, any questions of Mr. Huber? Questions, comments for Mr. Huber or Mr. Lofquist?
I just want to reiterate what Mr. Kohler said, that I'm in agreement with the mailbox cluster being moved from the entrance. I think that's kind of a no-brainer that you guys can easily do. Thank you.
Yeah, and for our part as a developer, kind of a new wrinkle for us too, that this is a new postal requirement, and it's trickier than you think, right? It seems easy, but no one wants it near their house, no one wants it in their front yard, but everyone wants their mail. You can't put it too far in the back because you don't want people making special trips, so there's a lot of feedback for an issue like this. We look forward to just working it out with you.
Any other comments, questions?
I got a question. To go back to the sidewalk, I know they put money in the sidewalk fund. We were under the understanding at the last meeting that they would be putting it up to, I guess, the back of the firehouse through lot 17. And then it was going to go from there to approximately Pippin and Struble Road there. I took it was going to connect to I guess there's a sidewalk on a corner already at Pippin and Struble? Not coming, or I'm sorry, not Struble, Kemper Road. Pippin and Kemper, is there anything there?
There's none on Kemper until you get down to the Hunterston. On Pippin, it's on the northeast corner has sidewalks. The other three corners do not.
Okay. So at this point, we're going to have a sidewalk that goes to the back of the fire station
Correct.
and nothing to connect it to the sidewalk that would make it to the school.
Correct.
And I think that was a big issue, real big issue with sidewalks.
Yes. Mhm.
And I don't know where this falls. These guys here are throwing in, if I remember right, it was $75,000 to a sidewalk fund. And we're not getting a sidewalk.
I wouldn't say you're not getting it. I just don't know if the township trustees have taken formal action to appropriate those funds for that project. That's the key thing, is when you take that sidewalk fund money and turn it into an actual project. I believe in the minds of trustees that that is the intent, that the township would take responsibility for taking it from the back of the sidewalk to Pleasant Run Elementary.
I would think that would be first on the list for that money, being that's what it was thrown out there for. So I hope that's the way it goes. That's all I have.
That's where I want to be really clear. From lot 17 to the firehouse, that part's going to be done.
No.
To the back of the
From-
firehouse.
To the back of the firehouse.
To the back of the firehouse,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay.
correct.
But from the front of the firehouse to the intersection of Kemper and Pittman, that's still up in the air.
Correct. The part, let me get my
At
arrow.
our last meeting, it was estimated from 17 to the back of the firehouse was about $40,000, if I remember correctly.
The 75, I thought was to make it all the way to the intersection. The firehouse is already there.
Right, well, the intersection doesn't give you a good connection to the school. It needs
Right, it's
to
on the
go-
other side of the intersection, right.
Yeah.
There's still a chunk on Pippin needed as well. Let me get back to, maybe that would help. Do we have
We're basically going from the front of lot 17 to the back of lot 17 with a sidewalk. How far is that approximately?
However deep the lot is,
Looks like 120 feet.
Yeah. So my laser point is at that back of the fire station. That is where their sidewalk leaves off. So the township part would be to take it through the fire station over to Pippin Road and then down Pippin Road. And it's maybe close to 1,000 feet till you get to the school. And there's no sidewalk there now.
$75 a foot.
Right.
You could probably do a sidewalk for that.
However, whatever happens to what sidewalk issue, that's really not purview of this particular approval or disapproval.
Right.
It's a township issue. Okay.
We can make it known to the trustees that that is your preference for use of that
Okay.
fund, if you would like.
Okay.
Well, I'm just saying at the time, it was a really big issue. The people that were here from the neighborhood, that was one of their main concerns. So they made sure these guys were responsible for that. I just want to make sure whoever's responsible down the line from there follows through.
Okay, commissioners, any further questions or comments for staff or our applicants present this evening?
Just want to say I like the playground. Thank you. I know I kept harping on that.
Okay. Commissioners, any further discussion among ourselves before I call for a motion? Hearing none, would somebody please care to make a motion?
I will make a motion to approve case ZA 2021-01 Abbeytown Final Development Plan with the recommendations that the staff had there,
Okay,
I'll
or
second.
conditions.
you're seconding that? Okay, so it has been moved and a second to approve this case as is presented by staff. Before we call for a roll call vote, is there any other discussion of the motion itself? Is there anything that needs to be added to it, particularly in light of our just recent comments about the sidewalk? Hearing none, Mr. Kohler, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. McMullen?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
No?
Mr. Westfall?
Aye.
Mr. Faring?
Yes.
Mr. Grody?
Yes. Gentlemen, the motion carries. So I guess you'll be firing up the bulldozers pretty soon, huh?
Yeah.
By Friday, you'll have them out there, right? Yeah.
If the rain holds off, sure.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Moving on, we have case ZA 2006-06, Sterkel Storage. It's an amendment to the final development plan. Mr. Kohler, the staff have a presentation.
Yes. This is an application by Mike Cassidy with Preferred Resources representing Circle Storage. This is for a minor amendment to a final development plan to replace the freestanding signs with larger signs than previously approved. Preliminary development zoning map amendment had been approved for this property by Zoning Commission and the Board of Trustees back in 2006. The current zoning is planned development industrial, PDI, and commercial developments are permitted with this, subject to final plan review by Zoning Commission. This shows the location of Circle Storage. It's on the north side of I-275, fronts on Struble Road. This is just west of, or east of Colerain Avenue. This property was approved for self-storage back in 2006. There was a subsequent amendment to that. It's a little unfortunate. I have not been able to locate all the records pertaining to the original signs. There was a condition that the signs be approved as part of the package with the final development plan. It just happens to be, I couldn't find that in the file. So I was hoping to be able to come up with more specifics as to what the exact height and size, which were previously approved. Absent that, I would say that both of the signs that are being requested are larger and taller than what was previously installed on the site. Let me get to this. This is a little closer view. There are two freestanding signs on the site. There's a monument-style sign on Struble Road, that's the one to the north, and then a pylon, that means it's a raised sign on the 275 frontage. This is the view from 275. It's, wow, doesn't show up. I'll see if I can zoom it. You can see the freestanding sign to the left. There's also wall signs on the end of one of the buildings for circle storage. This is another view from the opposite side of I-275. And if I could, it's a little bit more zoomed in. Let's see, yeah, that's, well, for some reason in the zoom mode, it doesn't let me use the pointer. Sorry about that. This is the Struble Road sign, the monument sign. The applicant has submitted these documents. This shows the location of the two signs. This is a mock-up of what the proposed sign would look like to scale if approved. Another mock-up looking the opposite direction. This would be the actual sign. It is proposed, this is the interstate sign, proposed to be 38 feet in height. Under our sign regulations in the PDI zone, the maximum height is stated at 15 feet. And that's the maximum height for any sign now in the Colerain zoning resolution. This is a mock-up of the one that is on Kemper Road. This one is proposed to be 8 feet in height. So it would comply with the 15 height regulation and 32 square feet in size. So height and size-wise, the one that is being proposed for the Struble Road frontage meets the requirements of the zoning regulations. This is a street view of the current sign on Struble Road. This is a mock-up for what the proposed sign would look like, which is very similar to what the existing sign is now. This is the actual drawing of what that sign looks like on Struble Road. The criteria, I won't go through this in detail because it's the exact same criteria that we looked at for Abbeytown. Same criteria for approval of a final development plan. This is a very narrow focused final development plan because we're only looking at the sign and not the entirety of the development. Staff's findings is that the final development plan is not consistent with the Colerain zoning resolution for freestanding signs with respect to the I-275 sign. Staff finds that a hardship may exist for the proposed sign facing I-275 due to the speed of traffic and distance between the road right-of-way and traffic travel lanes, which may warrant additional sign size and height to increase the readability. The sign regulations that we have for freestanding signs are really laid out because most businesses are on either county roads or township roads, fairly low speed limits. Our sign regulations were really never geared towards trying to advertise from I-275. We actually only allow one sign per lot for commercial developments. Because of this double frontage, they are asking for signs on both frontages. Struble Road primarily more of a wayfinding, the one on I-275 more as a business promotion type sign. Staff is concerned that the animated message is not appropriate for fast-moving traffic, and there's a limited time to view the sign message, and the animation can be a distraction to driving. Since I wrote this recommendation, I did have some additional correspondence with the applicant. Even though the sign is, has the technical capability of doing animation, scrolling, that type of thing, they say the intent is to not have it scroll, that they change the message periodically. We do allow that in our zoning regulation for signs. They can change up to 4 times per minute, but it has to be a instant transition. You can't scroll the message on signs. The difficulty from staff's perspective with that regulation is that they come with the capability of scrolling or doing animation, whether or not that is the intent for using it that way. And we have quite a few of those on Colerain Avenue that are scrolling messages, moving messages, and we have to inform the current management that I know you got that capability to do animation, but that is not permitted by our zoning regulations. And there's no real halfway technology for this type of sign. In any event, our zoning regulations do not allow animated signs. And it's more just from a planning perspective, we're not terribly fond of seeing that type of advertising in a public roadway. We do not allow billboards anymore, for instance, in Colerain, unless the state, like you can do them in agricultural land, but the time for doing billboards on commercial properties expired decades ago, and we haven't seen any new billboards. The concern is whether the billboard companies will eventually want to start refacing those with the automated screens. It's much easier for them. The technology's getting better. The technology's getting cheaper for the large format screens. And so I think we're going to be seeing a push for that in the future. And the preference from a planning perspective is to not necessarily have that form of advertising on the streetscape of Colerain Township, if possible. So with that said, staff's recommendation is for approval with conditions. And the conditions are that the I-275 sign height not exceed 30 feet, which is 15 feet more than what is permitted, but 8 feet less than what is being requested. That the 275 sign not exceed 200 square feet, which is 50 square feet more than is permitted. 150 square feet is the max. And 94 square feet less than what's requested. Third is that the I-275 sign contain no animated message, and the applicant has expressed that that is not their intent. Number 4 is that the Struble Road sign have landscaping around the base. There is a requirement in our sign standards that says that you have to have landscaping around the base of a monument sign equal to the size of the face of the sign. And it gives some more specifics in terms of the types of plantings. That wasn't a part of the package, but that's part of my recommendation. For Struble Road, the I-275 frontage, I can see some practical difficulties just in terms of where the sign is located, trying to plant and maintain a buffer around that sign. So the recommendation is the requirement for landscaping around the base of the I-275 sign be waived, since it will not be visible from I-275. So that's our recommendation. It's sort of a mid-ground between what is being proposed and what the code requires.
Thank you, Mr. Kohler. Commissioners, any questions of Mr. Kohler or comments?
So I just wanted to clarify the grade. So I drove past and it obviously is down from the roadway, which is why the height is requested to be so tall. If you're at a road level, do you know for the 38 feet that is being requested, is that more eye level with the drivers, or is that still raised a bit? Do we know?
I'm kind of glad you brought that up. I pulled out the preliminary development plan, which has topography. And I think I put in the staff report what that grade difference is. According to the topography, it says it's 6 feet lower. Visually, it looks much lower. And I don't know if there was an error in the topography, or maybe there was some grading done after the preliminary plan was approved, something different. What we have done in other plan developments, I can think of, there was an auto parts store on Colerain Avenue next to Dick's Sporting Goods. They had a freestanding sign. The grade dropped steeply off from Colerain Avenue. Basically, we said that they could do a 15, or no, for that shopping center, there was an overall requirement. You couldn't go over 8 foot for a monument sign. We said you could go 8 foot as measured at the sidewalk elevation. So however far back they went and down, it would still be that height above the pavement level. If there's a discrepancy about that, we could say, for instance, 30 feet above whatever the pavement level is of I-275, because that grade difference might not be known. Sorry to confuse things.
No, that makes sense. Thank you.
Mr. Kohler, on your condition number 4 regarding the Struble Road sign, you have not listed any specific measurements in there. Am I assuming that what the applicant has presented to us in the packet of their measurements is what you're recommending to us?
That is correct.
Okay, okay. Okay, and then, Mr. Kohler, assuming that your recommendation is approved this evening, and no animated messages are permitted of any kind, then the applicant would be able to use that space where that animation would be for however else they want to put message up there, permanent message. Redesign the message on the sign itself?
They could choose to do that. They could also choose to do the message that could change up to 4 times per minute
Okay,
and meet our code standards.
okay. But if that is approved, that it would change every 4 minutes, then the technology is still there while we're not looking that it get changed to animation at some time.
And that becomes an enforcement problem.
Yes, okay. Okay. So your item 3, item 3, when it says no animated message, is that nothing, or are you saying the 4-minute change would?
Our definition of animated is like a scrolling message
Okay.
or a ongoing moving message,
Okay,
like the video screen type thing.
okay. What about the message that appears on the side of the building? Is there any question about that remaining or needing to disappear or anything like that?
Yeah, that message is proposed to remain and is not being proposed to change.
Okay, nor are we wanting it to change
Well,
or disappear?
not necessarily. At least in terms of past policy, we have tended to favor larger signs on buildings in exchange for smaller freestanding signs, because the freestanding signs are perceived as the ones that really cause the visual clutter. I will say, let me see if I can zoom in on this a bit, but I mean, that's the current sign on the interstate. And it's a fairly large sign, but it's not terribly readable. I know this is not the best technology for photographing. It tends to be the ones that are on the main highways. When you have fast-moving traffic, you want to have a large, bold, short message. And that's the impact. If you have a lot of detailed script on a sign that size, it's not going to be readable when you're doing 65 miles an hour. So just as a comment, that sign is pretty large, but it's not necessarily legible.
Okay.
The new sign has larger fonts.
Right, you basically have 2 seconds to get your message across. That's about the time that I had to really look and focus.
Yeah.
I do have a question about number 4. Typically, when we see a final development plan, which I know this is amended, for the landscaping, we tend to provide guidance on what kind of landscaping it is that we want. I didn't see that in the packet. Are we just going to allow any kind of landscaping around the base of the sign on Struble, or were the applicants?
The zoning code actually does have specific requirements that deal with landscaping at the base of a sign. And they say, you know, perennial shrubs, mulch, those types of things are actually called out in the code.
Right, usually I see them in the plan itself, you know, like the plan, you know,
Yeah,
like
I'm
there's
not
gonna
sure
be
the
this bush
applicant
and
was
that plant.
aware that that was a requirement at the time that they submitted the application.
Okay, fair enough.
But again, visibility is kind of an interesting thing. It's hard to mistake this from I-275 when you're looking at that picture. You know it's a self-storage unit. It's very evident just by its appearance. The sign on the end of the building is large, is bold. So if somebody is looking for self-storage and they're driving down 275, it's not like this site is hidden. I think I had the traffic count in here. There's 90-some thousand cars that drive by this every day. So that's pretty good advertising.
Do we have any other signs like this in Colerain Township on the highway?
Not that I know that are freestanding.
Mr. Kohler, on the Struble Road sign, it's the applicant's intent to move it closer to the road?
No. Oh, no. Same location.
Okay. Because it's quite a bit off the road, and there's a tree coming from the west that hides the sign until you get right on top of it.
Right. It's required to be 10 feet from the road right-of-way, which is further back from the edge of the pavement. So they're basically complying with that 10-foot setback from the road right-of-way.
Okay. Commissioners, any other comments or questions for Mr. Kohler? We could have the applicant come forward, please, and would you please state your name and your address, and please spell your last name for the record.
Good evening. My name is Mike Cassidy, Cassedy. My company is Preferred Resources. Oh, my address, 5769 Vice Lane, Burlington, Kentucky. My company is Preferred Resources, which is a signage and graphic facilitator. I've been in the business for about 45 years, and what we do is we actually design signage, we spec write signage for the end user and for other sign companies. We also review sign packages for the end users, such as Circle Storage, and for the sign companies themselves. So I was asked to look at this project pretty much because of the electronic message center and the interstate exposure and the fact that the current code only permits one sign and we're looking at two. Before I get any deeper, I do want to let you know that John Bishop is here tonight from Circle Storage to answer any questions that you may have for him. Secondly, I want to thank Marty. I think we've talked twice on the phone maybe. And his presentation that he did tonight was excellent. I mean, it gave an overall picture that we were hoping to be able to have. Now, with that said, I apologize because basically I'm going to blow that whole thing out of the water. I have copies here of some changes that we would like to make. So I would like to be able to present that to the board.
Okay.
Thank you.
You need, Mr. Westfall needs one over there.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Westfall is the commissioner over here.
I thought maybe I only got 5 copies.
Okay, all right,
I'm sorry.
no problem. We can share. Go ahead.
We should be good just like this.
Thank you.
Close. Like I said, I apologize for. But I didn't want to disturb the presentation that Marty was going through because I wasn't sure about the parliamentary procedures that you have here. When you're looking at the plans, you see that we basically eliminated the electronic message center. And the reason we did that, pure and simply, is the economics. Now, the other part of it is that it is much more consistent with your sign code. The street sign, let me start with the street sign. The street sign on Struble Road, we are not going to introduce a brand new sign. We basically will upgrade the existing sign, putting new plastic faces in it, repaint the cabinet and the support. So we basically are going to have exactly the same sign with the new graphics for the branding that Circle Storage has been working on for over a year. So what you see on the drawings for the street sign is exactly the same sign with new faces, fresh coat of paint in the same location. The interstate sign. I need to let you know that the picture that you see right now, we took a crane to the location and flew an actual mock-up so we could determine the appropriate height of that particular sign so that you can see it from the interstate from both directions, east and westbound. We made that determination of where the bottom of the sign needed to be, and we built up from there. Now, with the new proposal that we're presenting to you tonight, we need to maintain that same height off grade from grade to the bottom of the sign, but the overall height now has been reduced down to 29 feet. We haven't asked to increase the height of the static sign that says Circle Storage. We're only maintaining the distance from the bottom, from grade to the bottom of the sign. I was on the location when we actually flew the mock-up. And I understand what we're saying about the 6 foot, but I would tell you that from the crown of the Interstate 275 to the bottom of to the base of the sign itself is about 12 feet. What your topographical may be looking at is at the point of where the fence is to the foundation, but we have almost another additional 6 feet that go from the crown of the interstate to that fence line. So the overall difference in elevation is about 12 feet. More importantly, we flew the mock-up to make this determination. So what you see is exactly what it would have, is exactly what it will be. In the sign industry, we kind of work a little bit backwards. We find out what is the appropriate size of the copy, and then we draw a rectangular square around it. The C, the uppercase lettering that you see here, the C and the S, are 26 inches tall. The lowercase is about 18. 18 is really the minimum letter height that we in the sign industry recommend. We took all the parameters that are necessary to have appropriate readership in color contrast between copy and background, in letter style, and also in upper and lower case. What people don't realize is that we read words in groups, word groups. We don't read individual letters, or individual letters and individual words. When we do signage in upper and lower case, you read circle storage as a word group. If we had done those all in uppercase, you would have read circle and then storage. Those are just the studies that we go through. So the reason for the upper and lower case in the graphics is because it's more readable, even though the lower case is smaller. People will be able to identify this. So we looked at the letter style, we looked at the color contrast. We did not, in the branding exercise, utilize their logo. They have a logo itself. We did not put it on here because we basically were in the KISS program, keep it simple. I left the last part out, but we all know what that is. But seriously, I mean, that is exactly why what you have before you is as simple and as identifiable and as effective advertising that we are able to give circle storage at this particular location with this particular type of sign. We're at a 5 foot by 21 foot, which is 105 square feet, substantially less than what we originally proposed. The height has been somewhat reduced because now we're still maintaining that height from grade to the bottom of the sign. We need to do that. That's the most important thing. Marty, can you go back to the other old sign? I believe the other sign was a 7 by 14, which is 98 square feet. But because of its height, lack of height.
You had one in your packet, didn't
I know
you?
it's in there somewhere. Yeah.
I have one that I took.
It's
Or,
okay.
I mean, I
Well,
captured.
that's as good an example of, yeah, there it is. This was in 2006. I didn't design this thing. But we're back on that KISS program where all we wanted was, we should have had just the name, not the telephone number, not all the additional information. There's no way. Plus, it just isn't tall enough. But I think what happened was they were trying to hold within the zoning regulations of signage, and that's how they ended up with what they did. So we are now going through a new branding process for circle storage. They have changed out 3 or 4 of their locations with the new white on green, with a new look to it. They're trying to give a new, fresher look to the self-storage. And we have eliminated the electronic message center, and that principally is the economics. But in my letter, which I hope you had a chance to read, we have done this before. I can tell you specifically at Boone County, Kentucky, and I can tell you in Bethel, Ohio. And I can also tell you in Fairfield, Ohio, that the owners of the electronic message center have made their electronic message center available to that municipality, to the county, or to the city. If you have the Rotary, if you have the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, any public organization that would like to be able to advertise on that electronic message center, we were making up to 20% of the display time available to the city. How difficult is it to do it? You can program it right from where you are right now on an on a computer. We have the capability. We actually, on the electronic message center, I realize this is water over the dam, but maybe it will help you in the future with any of these electronic message centers. We actually assign a telephone number to that particular sign. And we will program it from anywhere, from our iPhone, from anywhere, to make those changes. Our proposal was to the township to make that 20% available to you. All you've got to do is let us know, and then we would program it into the electronic message center, and you could be displaying the fire department's fish fry this coming Friday from 4 to 8. And the reason for that is because we want to keep the messages fresh on the electronic message center. Now, I know that's water over the dam, but it is one of those things that is a nice proposal that any of the sign end users, such as Circle Storage, could make available to you. I don't think there's anything else that I can really add to this, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have. And Marty, thanks again.
Sure.
Nice job.
Thank you, Mr. Cassidy. First of all, before you move on, Mr. Bishop, is there anything that you would like to add?
I'm here to help answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any questions, comments, et cetera, for Mr. Cassidy?
I just have one. If this were to go up, the old sign's coming down, correct?
Absolutely, correct.
Okay, on the Struble Road side, sir, I'm going to call it the brick flower base around it, that's going to remain?
That's going to remain.
Okay, but still adhere to the
And we'll dress it up with some more landscaping.
landscaping?
I kind of laughed when I first did the survey at this particular location here. I saw the sign out in the middle of nowhere, and I thought, what the heck? But it will do a much better job because we're eliminating the reader board, the changeable copy, and we're putting just the graphics up. So people, as they drive by, I would like to make one other comment, and I'm sorry, and I left this out of my presentation. The building sign has large letters on it, but until you are directly in front of that particular sign and you look through your side window of your vehicle, you cannot read that sign. So it's there. It was thought to be a good idea at the time, but basically it's not a very effective exposure to the interstate in terms of readership, identification, and advertising. Okay. And it actually doesn't say the name of the business. It is about climate control.
Thank you, Mr. Cassidy. Before you leave the podium there, commissioners, any final questions, comments for Mr. Cassidy? Okay. Mr. Kohler, could we go back to your staff recommendation and the conditions and see what we need to amend or add or change in light of Mr. Cassidy's presentation to us?
Sure. There we go. Well, condition number one, the I-275 sign not exceed 30 feet in height, and as I see on this drawing, they're proposing 29, so that would comply.
Okay.
Number two, the I-275 sign not exceed 200 square feet in size. Actually, they're only at 105 square feet with what's being proposed.
Okay. Do we need to amend that 200 square feet to something else?
If you want to keep it to this size at 105 square feet, we would change it to 105 square feet. There's a simpler way, actually. If you like this proposal, and generally, just backing up, we don't like to actually see amendments on the floor because a lot of times they're difficult to react to. Fortunately, this is a very straightforward, fairly simple issue. So I'm not as stressed about having something presented on the floor as I might normally be. But with that said, number 3, contain no animated message. This contains no animated message. 4, the Struble Road sign be landscaped at the base. I think that still is something that would need to be addressed. And the requirement for landscaping around the base of I-275 be waived. Number 4 and 5, I think, still need to be addressed.
Okay.
And it sounds like the applicant's willing to go with that. Barring that, number 1 through 3 basically would become nullified by this new submission. What you could do is adopt the final development plan amendment as submitted tonight, this set of drawings, new set of drawings, with conditions number 4 and 5.
Okay.
And just forget conditions 1 through 3 and just say this is what is submitted is the final development plan.
Before calling for a motion and any other discussion, commissioners, do you understand what Mr. Kohler is presenting to us to do to deal with this?
I would like for him to repeat that.
Staff's amended recommendation is for approval of the final development plan as submitted at tonight's meeting, May 18th, 2021, as submitted with the requirement, now number 1, the Struble Road sign have landscaping around the base in accordance with 15.5.4 of the zoning resolution, and number 2, that the requirement for landscaping around the base of the I-275 sign be waived, since it will not be visible from I-275.
Does that help clarify it for you, Mrs. Smith?
Somewhat.
What are you,
Which ones are we going to keep?
4 and 5.
4 and 5?
4 and 5? And basically, we are, I don't want to say nullifying, we are rejecting the previous submission
Correct,
in favor of tonight's submission.
correct. Okay, so again, everybody understands what Mr. Kohler is saying. Okay, commissioners, any further discussion among ourselves before I ask for a motion?
I just want to say that while I appreciate the changes to the plan, I honestly would rather it come back before the board as a amended final plan. My reasoning for that is we represent our community, and at this point, only 5 sets of eyes have even had a chance to look at any of these plans. No one in the audience can see these as well. So I kind of feel that we need to allow, not that we would have a public hearing, I don't mean that at all, but some type of opportunity for community members to be able to see what it is that is being presented and voted on. Again, that's just me.
And I think that's what Mr. Kohler was saying, that when an applicant comes in with an amendment the night of the meeting,
Right.
that gets to be a ticklish situation for what you're saying and also for what Mr. Kohler was expressing.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, my logic for that as well is this is a final, so this piece of it doesn't go before the trustees at all either. So we are voting kind of blindly for the community to know what it is that we are approving.
Can I comment?
Please come to the podium, sir.
McMullen, I appreciate that part. And I guess one of the questions would be is if there was anybody here that actually objected to what was originally proposed, and if they weren't, what we've done is substantially reduce this. The objection would have to be somebody says, hey, I wanted that electronic message center, because basically that's the only difference between what was originally proposed and what we are putting as an amendment tonight. And if there was somebody here that objected to the electronic message center, then we fulfilled that objection. But unless someone is here to object to taking the electronic message center out, I think that the amendment can stand alone on its own. I don't think that this is something that you're trying to pass through without the residential community being made aware of it. If they had an issue with it, I think they would have shown up tonight, and the issue would have probably have been the electronic message center. So that would be my logic in terms of being able to amend this tonight, knowing that we've just greatly reduced everything and kept as much of it as we could as is without making major changes.
Right. A response to that is tonight's meeting, according to our agenda, doesn't have citizens address, no public address. And also, for the electronic messaging, we never got a chance to vote for it. So that's kind of put in a vote outcome in front of a vote that didn't happen, meaning that the electronic messaging system, me personally, I agree with the no animated, but the digitalized part, the script, me personally, I didn't have a problem with that.
Right, and
I think for me, and I don't speak for them. I mean, everyone else on the commission may be comfortable with it. Just for me personally, I feel better, or would hope that we could delay the vote and table it until next month.
if the discussion took place before the board, and they said, we want to make a condition of approving this vote, and one of the conditions was to eliminate the electronic message center, you would be able to consider that, which is basically what we're saying tonight, is that you can make it a condition by the revised submittals that the electronic message center would not be part of the overall sign package. I'm just trying to put this in perspective in terms of being able to get this thing through so that we can move forward on our part.
Can I maybe help clarify, not overcomplicate? Obviously, this commission always has the ability to disregard staff's recommendation in favor of, if you like it as originally submitted, the height, the size, the animated board, all of that, you could not go with staff recommendation and approve that whole package as submitted, because we're in a planned district, so you are setting the development standards in that district, even though the sign regulations do have the planned district recommendations. If you had adopted staff's recommendations absent this new plan coming in tonight, and this plan came in tomorrow for final staff review, we would go through condition 1 and say, this meets that condition. Condition 2, this meets that condition. And we would issue a zoning certificate based on this particular plan, provided they do the landscaping. We would do that if you were to adopt staff's recommendation that has been published, because this complies. Certainly, if this is an amended application, you can delay the vote. I'm not trying to push you one way or the other, but I'm just telling you, procedurally, if you had adopted staff recommendation and this came in after the fact for my issuance of a zoning certificate, so he's off and running, this would comply with what you would have approved. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
How would this go out to the public anyhow? Say we were gonna hold it off till next month, you know? I mean, I don't see anybody here tonight complaining about this huge sign. I feel great that they've cut it down to this, what they have. And I wouldn't have approved the other, I can tell you that right now, because of the size of it and the message boards and all that. But this here, you know, and to prolong it for another month, I just think we're wasting your time, our time to bring us back here for the same thing that we're gonna go through right now. So, I don't know, just my thoughts.
I think what Ms. McMullen is trying to say, and correct me if I'm stating this improperly, typically when this commission gets something in our packets for us to prepare for the meeting, that's it.
Right.
Okay, and we're not accustomed at all for something being changed this drastically right here on the spot. And that's what we look for, is when an applicant comes in, that they've got their ducks in line, is this is what we really want to do, and not, we're still considering this, that, or other, and hope to do something else. Am I somewhat saying that properly?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I don't disagree, and I said I apologized, and I failed to mention to Marty, I will send all this to him electronically so he can put it in his electronic file, and I understand the concern. If we had taken this in a totally different direction, then I would see where the board would say, hey, you got to come back. But basically what we've done is we've put a condition on the application that there wouldn't be any electronic message center. And I will make this comment that we did realize that Colerain may not favor that electronic message center, and we thought, how can we be a better community member if we don't propose it? It saves us tens of thousands of dollars. It seems like a practical solution to the issue that we have and Colerain Township has. So how do we do that? And this discussion came up on Friday. It was agreed upon on Monday, and we are just here on Tuesday.
Question, was Mr. Kohler apprised of this change before tonight?
No, he was not.
Okay.
We literally pulled this together before I left my house in Boone County, Kentucky, and stopped at Kinko's and made copies and came up here, and I never even had time to send this electronically to Marty. I appreciate how Marty is trying to work through this, and I think that it's a doable situation.
Thank you, Mr. Cassidy. Okay, commissioners, any other? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Westfall.
Marty just said, we passed this as it was, and they brought this into him, they'd get a certificate. So why do we have to wait a month? Because we could pass this and he can bring us in tomorrow and get a certificate. Why should we wait a month?
Okay. So you're saying Mr. Kohler has the wherewithal to make changes based on what they might bring in tomorrow if we pass?
If I understand correctly, yes, he does.
Okay.
The advantage, if you consider an advantage, of adopting this revised plan over staff's recommendation is primarily in that square footage, that we were suggesting up to 200 square feet. This is 105. If you adopt this plan, it will be capped at 105.
Mm-hmm.
But somebody could also make a motion tonight, if I hear this right, to approve this the way it's changed by just saying, no, I'm not happy with what was submitted, but I make a motion to approve this with these changes. And then I don't have to put it back out there for the public not to show up again next month.
Yeah, generally you don't go bigger than.
Right, I mean, we're
bigger
going
and smaller.
smaller, you're cutting it in half
Yeah.
of the 200, it's 105 feet.
Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion?
No.
Okay, who wants to be the brave soul to make a motion?
I'll jump right in there.
I'm sorry?
I'll jump right in there.
Okay,
See if I can get this right. Want to make a motion for, gotta be able to see, KZA 2006-06 Circle Storage, amendment for that final plan on the sign, with the changes that were made tonight on this final that was submitted, and also, is it 1 and 2, Marty?
4 and 5.
4 and 5, as we discussed here.
I'll second it.
you'll second that? Okay. So it has been moved and seconded to approve ZA 2006-06 Circle Storage, amend final development plan by means of the proposal made this evening by the applicant, in addition to keeping items number 4 and 5 off of Mr. Kohler's initial recommendation for approval. Is that stating it properly?
If that is your wish, yes.
That's stating,
Yes.
did I get it all? Okay. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Ms. McMullen,
Yes.
Mr. Faring,
Yes.
Ms. Wilson, or, I'm sorry, Westfall,
Aye.
Mr. Grody.
Yes. Gentlemen, the motion passes.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it, we really do.
What is your timeline for starting?
Oh, we'll put the bulldozer out there tomorrow.
Yeah.
Now, we've got, it's a 6 to 8 week process.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
We will
gentlemen.
need a landscape plan to
Yes.
supplement this.
We'll get that to you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Kohler, any items with 5 through 10 on the agenda?
No.
Okay. Commissioners, any comments you would like to make at this time? Hearing none. Our next meeting is scheduled for June 15th, 2021. Mr. Kohler, does it look like we have some business lining up for that?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. The commission meeting is closed around 7:28. Thank you, everybody. If you'll turn your microphones off.